Hello students, this is a continuation of my previous video about the second interim assessment, which is going to be held at the end of this week, January, I believe, 7th and 8th. We left off with systems of equations and we did the first practice problem. When you look at the second problem, it asks you to use elimination to solve. And elimination, you know, we need the coefficients to be the same number but opposite signs. When you look at these two coefficients, the negative 3y and the positive 6y, you can see that they're already opposite signs, and all you need to do to get this 3y to be a 6y is to multiply it by 2. So what is a possible first step? Looking through all of these problems, I see that in this first one, we have two opposite coefficients, 6y and negative 6y. So it's most likely this one. In this case, I don't see any opposite coefficients. In this case, I don't see any opposite coefficients. In this case, I don't see an opposite coefficient. So this was kind of an easy problem. We're using elimination. Elimination means opposite coefficients. For C, when you solve for y, that's something that you might use graphing for. Again, with D, when you solve for y, that's something that you might be able to graph. And with B, when you solve for a variable like x, you might be able to use substitution for that. But A is the correct answer because this is talking about elimination. For the third one, the method of substitution is likely the best method for which system? As we said before, substitution is a method that requires, substitution is a method that requires one variable solved for by itself. So when I look at these equations, these systems of equations, 4x2y, 4x2y, there are coefficients on all four of these variables. There are coefficients on all four of these variables. There are coefficients on 1, 2, 3 of these variables, but one of them has a coefficient of 1. That's the y there. And this one has coefficients on all four variables. So my best solution for this one, if we're using substitution, we want to try to solve for a variable. It's easy to solve this equation for a variable. Wow, that was a terrible circling. It's easy to solve this equation for a variable because all we got to do is subtract 4x from both sides. So the method of substitution is likely the best method for C. I would solve it for y, I would substitute it in for this y, and then I'd solve it as normal. Last but not least, it says solve the set of equations. I get 2x plus y equals 8, 3x plus 2y equals 9. My first step here is to choose a method, and I think the method that I'm going to use is substitution. As I previously stated, I look at this system of equations and I see that the y is by itself, almost. I just need to subtract the 2x from both sides. So 2x plus y is equal to 8. If I subtract 2x from both sides, minus 2x, I get y equals negative 2x plus 8. And now I have one of the variables solved for. I'm going to take the other equation, which is 3x plus 2y equals 9, and I'm going to substitute this value, the y value that I just found, into that equation. So I'll actually take this value, negative 2x plus 8, I'll copy it, and underneath here I'll write 3x plus 2, but instead of writing y, I'll write down the conclusion that I had before. I'll write down the value of y that we found, equals 9. Now I'll do some simplification. I know that it's 3x plus distributive property tells us that 2 times negative 2x is negative 4x. Distributive property also tells us that 2 times 8 is 16 equals 9. Combining like terms, 3x plus negative 4x is negative x plus 16 equals 9. And the next thing I'm going to try to do is try to get all the numbers to the other side. So I have a negative x here. I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides, and I should get negative x is equal to 9 minus 16, which is negative 7. So if negative x is equal to negative 7, I divide both sides by negative 1, and I get x equals 7. I found the value of x. All I need to do is take this value and substitute it into any of the other equations. So I'll choose the one that I already made, I already solved for, y equals negative 2x plus 8. So I'm going to say y equals negative 2 and the value of x that I found, which is 7, plus 8. Now I'll simplify. Y is equal to negative 14 plus 8. And negative 14 plus 8 should give you y equals negative 6. I think. Yeah, that sounds about right. Okay, so our final answer has to be in the form of a solution to the set of equations, which is an ordered pair. The first value, 7, because we found x to be equal to 7. The second value, negative 6, because that's the y value. Remember, it has to be x comma y as our answer. Going to the back of that same sheet, I wanted to take a look at this problem, which is sort of a problem that requires you to read and annotate. I know that currently Tyrone has $60. Man, he's got it like that. And his sister has $135. Both of them get an allowance of $5 each week. Tyrone decides to save his entire allowance, but his sister spends all of hers each week, plus an additional $10 each week. Wow, she is really spending her money. After how many weeks will they each have the same amount of money? So we know with annotation it says after how many weeks will each of them have the same amount of money. So how many weeks is the thing that they're asking for. And the way that I use to set up this equation, or the systems of equations, is to try to figure out what the variables are. In this case, I'm going to say y is equal to the amount of money that each of them have, and x is going to be equal to the number of weeks that have gone by. So we'll use x and y for both of these equations. In the first equation, we'll talk about Tyrone first. So for Tyrone, this is not part of the equation, this is just telling you that we're talking about Tyrone. He currently has $60, so the amount of money he has is equal to $60. That's what he starts out with. And he gets an allowance of $5 each week, so we're going to add $5 per week, so $5 times x. That indicates how much money Tyrone has. And his money is increasing. Whereas his sister, who we'll call S, the sister, her amount of money, which I'm still going to use for y, because y is just the amount of money, is going to be equal to $135 because she starts with more. She's spending all of her allowance, and she's spending an additional $10 each week. So every week, she's losing $10. So that's $10 loss per week. What we could do for this is a number of different things. We could make a table. We could try to make some sort of chart. But we have this great little graph here, so we can use that graph. And we use the graph right now. Okay, through the magic of technology, I've set up the graph already. When you look at this graph, you should notice that I've, first of all, scaled the y-axis by tens, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, etc. The reason I scaled it like that is because my y values are going to be pretty big, right? 135, 60, those are my y-intercepts, so they're going to be pretty big. I also didn't scale the x-axis, but all of these lines are just going to represent 1. So this would be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, etc. So I suppose I could label that here. I should say that 1, 2, 3, 4, this is my 5th week. So keeping in mind that we're trying to scale it so that we can use the data that's given to us. 3, 4, 5. Okay, hopefully we won't have to use too many more than 5. For the first equation, which is y equals 60 plus 5x, that's Tyrone's equation. We'll use red for that one. We'll start at 60, which is our y-intercept, so that's here. And the next point is going to be 65, which in 1 week is at 65. Well, let's see, I guess that's going to have to be somewhere around here. And then the next point is going to be 70. 60 plus 2x. 60 plus 5 times 2 is 60 plus 10, which is 70. So that should be here. And this is going to be a linear equation. So instead of plotting out all of these points, I'm just going to sort of make a line. I'm just going to connect the dots that I've already made. So I'm starting from here. And, oh man, what a neat trick. You can just make a line that looks like that, and I'm all set. For the next equation, which we'll make blue, it's y equals 135 minus 10x. We're starting at 135, so this is 110, 120, 130. 135 is going to be just about here in the middle. And the next point is going to be 10 less. So instead of 135, it's going to be 125. So that's 125 right there. And again, instead of making the whole thing, I'm just going to go back to my drawing program and I'm going to say, well, I need a straight line. So starting from here, I'm just going to make a nice straight line, and it looks like it intersects somewhere in there. And these are actually pretty accurate lines, I would say. Not bad at all. So now we have a point of intersection. It says, after how many weeks will they have the same amount of money? Looks like the point of intersection is going to be right here. And, oh man, did we predict it at the beginning? Following this line all the way down, it looks like the number of weeks is 5. And it doesn't really matter how much money they're going to have at that time. It asks how many weeks. So the answer is they'll have the same amount of money, which is here, at 5 weeks. Next, we'll talk about the solving equations and inequalities page. The practice problem said which part of the following problem should be worked first. When it says worked, it means which part should be evaluated first. And in this case, we're going to use PEMDAS parentheses first. When you look at this fraction, the 54 plus 41 over 5, we can consider the numerator of that fraction to be encased in a set of parentheses. Even though they're not drawn, that has to be done first before you divide by 5. So 54 plus 41 has to be evaluated first. That's our answer for that. Follow the steps in solving this linear equation. When we look at the steps, the first initial step is do the distributive property. 3 times x, that's 3x. It checks out. 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. Hello, what happened here? That was an improper use of the distributive property. Additive inverse is when you add two things and they turn into 0. Associative property is when you move the groupings, but the meaning stays the same. And multiplicative inverse is when you multiply by the reciprocal and it becomes 1. Let's skip to the next page of this so we can do some of the other practice problems. It gives us an inequality and it says to solve it, to figure out what it's equivalent to. So let's solve this together here. We have 3x plus 2 is greater than x plus 8. And we solve this just like any other equation. So we're going to try to follow our 5 golden rules, 4 of which you know. We're going to subtract x from both sides. So we get 2x plus 2 is greater than 8. And again, we subtracted x from both sides. Now we're going to try to move the numbers to the other side. We subtract 2 from both sides. So we should get 2x is greater than 8 minus 2, which is 6. And then we divide by 2. When we divide by 2, let me move this over here a little bit. When we divide by 2, we should get x is greater than 3. Since we divided by a positive number, we don't have to switch this sign. This sign stays as x is greater than 3. So looking through our answers, looks pretty easy here. We got choice C. Boom. Let's see. Let's try to do this one. If y is an integer, what is the solution set of negative 3 is less than or equal to y is less than 2? So we know that y has to be less than 2. It can't be equal to 2, it has to be less than 2. So looking through our answer choices, we see that choice B has a 2 in it. Well, y has to be less than 2, it can't be equal to 2, so it can't be B. It also says that negative 3 is equal to or less than y. So what we have to figure out is which one of these has a negative 3 in it, because negative 3 is okay to be equal to y. Well, this one doesn't have a negative 3, so it can't be that. And the only two choices are this one and this one. C doesn't have any positive numbers in it, but this says y could be less than 2. And let's say 0, that's less than 2, so 0 makes sense. This one is the correct answer because it has all the possible numbers in it. And this one doesn't have any positive numbers. But y could be a positive number. It could be 0 or 1. So it's definitely not choice C. Last but not least, we have a distributive property problem that's given students problems in the past. We see that it's 5x minus 2 parentheses x plus 1 equals 10. We know we do distributive property. We're distributing a negative 2, so it's 5x minus 2x minus 2 equals 10. We combine like terms. We get 3x minus 2 equals 10. We add 2 to both sides. 3x equals 12. And we divide by 3. X equals 4. All right, so we just reviewed another one of the sheets. Stand by for part 3 of the series when I finish reviewing these sheets. Good luck with studying.